Hello, I'm Casey and I'm going to teach you a little bit about getting started with crochet today. This is a very beginner class, so I'm trying to make this super duper easy. When you have some yarn, you want to look at the yarn label. You want to find the little hook, that's the crochet hook. This is for knitting needles, so I don't know how to knit, so I'm not going to teach you that right now. This is the size of crochet hook that you need. You need H8 or a 5mm crochet hook. I'm not using this yarn though, I'm using some bigger yarn that I've already wound for you. So for this one, so it's a size K or a 6.5mm. There are a variety of different types of crochet hooks. Use whatever you like. But you can see it is also a size K or 6.5mm. I'm going to use this yarn because it's big and it shows up well, and I think that'll help you all. The number one most important thing is that you have some yarn and you have a hook. So let's get started. I like to make my yarn in a ball because that makes it easier to roll off as I'm crocheting, and I don't have a lot of resistance from the yarn. I'm going to put it over here, and the first thing we're going to do is give ourselves about 3 or 4 inches of yarn. Come over here, and we're going to make a little slip knot. So the way I do that, I take my 3 or 4 inches, I'm gonna come over here, I'm gonna make a little loop, and then I'm gonna tie that loop into itself so that I have this little loop, and I want the loop at the end to be about the size that I could, maybe if I had a little green pea, I could push it through here comfortably. And this is our starting point, so pull it nice and tight, and this is our starting point. With your dominant hand, you're going to hold the crochet hook. So I'm going to hold it here, and you can hold it like a knife, or you can hold it like a pencil. I prefer the hold it like a pencil method, but you can try both ways and see what's easiest for you. You are going to stick this hook through the hole. So now you could pull up, you have some resistance, and then you're going to grab this yarn and you're going to pull it through that hole to make another loop about the size that you could fit a little green pea through. And we're going to continue doing that. We're going to make a little chain. So this is the getting started part. So pull it through and make that little chain, and your tail end is over here, so you're pulling from your yarn stash. Okay, so you're just going to continue pulling through, and you don't have to count these stitches. The beautiful thing about this kind of crochet is we're just going to learn to make a flat thing, and the advantage there is you don't have to have a lot of plans in the very beginning. You can just make this flat thing. So I'm going to just continue pulling that yarn through and pulling it through and pulling it through. So now I have a chain that's about, what is this? This is maybe about 5 inches. So let's go a little bit more. I'm going to pull through, and if you're having any trouble, if your yarn is slipping, just keep trying. You'll get the hang of it sooner or later. But pull it through. We just want to make a nice little chain. So when we get to the end of our chain, it's going to look like this. And if you're enjoying making this chain, you can make some chain all day long. So again, I'm in this hole and I'm grabbing that yarn. I'm pulling it back through the hole to make a new hole. Pulling just a little bit more. All right, so now I'm at an end point. This is a good length of chain for us to get started on. So now we have our, whoops, if you fall out of that hole, you just go right back into it. So now we have this chain that we've made, and we can look and we can see all of our lovely little chain stitches. What I'm going to do now is look at it and find a way that I can see a hole. So you're going to kind of look at it, find those two pieces of yarn that kind of twist around each other, and then you'll have one little loop on the bottom where there's a hole. I'm going to go back through this hole with my crochet hook, and then I'm going to put yarn underneath the hook and come back through exactly the same hole and bring it up. So now you can see that I have two loops right here on my crochet needle. The next part, loop around your hook and then pull that through both of these loops. So I'm going to hook it and I'm pulling it through. So now I have a new loop. So we've just turned around and we've made our first stitch. Now you're just going to look for the next hole, the next place that you can go under two. All right, we look real close right here. We've got this loop hanging down. So then we want this loop to be hanging down. So you've got one loop. I'm going to go to the next place I see a hole, which is going to be like right here. I'm going to put that hook through. I'm going to bring some more through. So now I've got my two friends up here, and we want to loop around and bring those two friends together, and then we have another. So we're going to find that next hole. Next place is going to be right here. So I'm going to go under here. I'm going to pull back through the exact same hole, and now we've got our two friends, and we will stitch them together by pulling through both of them. I think the hardest part of crochet is figuring out this first row. And if you go through the wrong holes, which there's not a wrong way to do it, but if you go through the wrong holes, it's still going to turn out okay in the end. All right, so I'm going to find the next place I can go under two, which is going to be here. And I'm going to hook this, bring it back through that exact same hole. And now I have my two friends. So I'm going to just stitch them together by pulling there. My next hole, where are you? Are you here? Yes. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to bring this through so that we have our two loops. And then I'm going over and I'm going to stitch those together. So we'll continue that. I'm looking for the next place that I can go into a hole where I have two threads of yarn on top. So there it is. I'll pull back through that hole, and now I have my two friends. There they are. And I'm going to loop around and I'm going to stitch them together. So here we go again. We'll do that same thing all the way through. So I'm going to find my next hole where I can go under two. So here I am, I'm going through. I'm going to loop around my hook and pull back through that exact same hole. And then I'm going to pull through those two friends and come on up. And you can see we're creating this nice little row of our crochet stitches. If you skip a stitch here and there, or you put too many in, just keep going. All right, next place we have a hole is going to be here. I'm going to pick up that yarn from behind, pull it through the same hole. Now I have my two friends, so I'm going to loop around the hook and then pull that string through those two friends to stitch them together. And what's happening here is my yarn has gotten caught on some other yarn, so sometimes you need to kind of pull a little bit harder to get it through there, or use your crochet hook to make it a little bit bigger. But that's okay. I'm going to move to the next place and find my hole and go through. Pull that back. Now I have my 2 friends, and I'm going to put my hook on the yarn and bring it through. Now, if you're finding that your yarn is pulling at you from back here, like if this yarn is pulling too hard, that's going to be a problem. So make sure that you have loose yarn coming at you. Then, however you want to hold your yarn with these fingers is okay. Some people like to kind of weave throughout fingers. I just like to hold it this way. But it's all very much personal preference. I also like to hold this part with these little fingers back here, but you don't have to. Whatever helps you do the best job and is the most comfortable, that's the right way for you. So I'm going through my hole, bringing my thread back, and bringing these 2 friends together. Ooh, I'm getting into the yellow. So next hole, go in here. I'm going to bring it back through. Now I have my 2 friends, and I'm just going to hook and bring that through. So then let's find the next place that I can go under 2. And when I say 2, I mean I can see this one and this one. So I'm not just going under one line of yarn, going under 2. Then we come up, we have our 2 friends here. I'm going to loop the yarn around and pull it back through those 2. So my next hole, bring the yarn through, have my 2 friends, and stitch them together. And the name of the game here isn't to pull this as tight as you can. This doesn't need to be super duper tight through here. It needs to just be very steady. So you can see mine are kind of steady. And you might get some curling. That's okay. It won't be curled at the very end unless you want it to. Let's find my next place that I can go under. So here, I'm going to pull this back through to where I have the 2 loops, and then I'll loop over and bring that through. Next place, I'm going under the 2, pulling that back through where I have my 2 friends, and then I will stitch them together. Now I have come to the end. So we're going to go one more stitch because there's one more place that I can go under 2 pieces of yarn. So see, there's a double that I can go under. So it's the one more place. So I'm going to go in there underneath, get my yarn, pull it back through, and then stitch these 2 friends together. I'm at the end of my row. So now I need to do what's called turning the chain. All I'm going to do, so I'm looking at the last stitch I just did. I am going to turn it back around so I can see it from the opposite direction. And then I'm going to move this yarn over so that it'll be coming from the back. I don't want that yarn in the front. And then I'm going to do the same thing I've been doing. So I'm going to go back into the very same stitch that I just finished, pull that yarn through, and there's my 2 friends again. And then I will stitch them together. And sometimes you've got to pull at your yarn if it's getting too much tension. All right, so that's it. And then once we've got that first row done, it's sort of like driving a standard. Once you get out of first gear, man, it's so much easier. Now it's going to be really easy to find the next hole you're going into. So you're going to go in this hole, pull back through, and now that you have 2 friends, stitch them together. Next hole, go on in, pull back through, and now that you have your 2 friends, put that yarn on the hook and stitch them together. Can you see how finding that next hole is so much easier once you have that first row? I love it. I hope that it's easier for you. If it's not, remember, it takes practice and nobody's really, really good straight out of the gate. So I'm going in my next hole, pulling that yarn back through. There are my 2 friends, and I'm simply going to stitch them together. Next hole, I'm going in, bringing that yarn through, and stitching my two friends together. So through the hole, yarn comes back through the hole. We have our two friends. We're going to put yarn on that hook and stitch those friends together. In the hole, two friends, and stitch them together. So we've got to find our next hole. There it is. Pull that yarn back through, two friends, and stitch them together. Hole, pull through, two friends, stitch them together. All right. Hole, pull the yarn back through, and stitch the two friends together. Hole, yarn coming back through, and stitch those two friends together. Hole, yarn coming back through, and then we're going to stitch the two friends together. Go through the hole, pull the yarn back through, and stitch those two friends together. Hole, pull the yarn back through, and stitch those two friends together. So there's the hole. Pull that yarn back through. Then we have our two friends, and we're going to stitch them together. Now, it gets tricky over here because you're like, where's my last stitch? The way you can tell is you've still got a piece sticking out here. So you're going to find a hole here. So let's just force our way through, pull it back through. There's our two friends, and we stitch them together. And again, it's time to turn the chain. So let's roll it over, and this time you can just keep your string in the back. And this is starting to curl. Like I said, that'll happen. The reason I know where the top is because I know where this stitch is, and I'm using multicolored yarn, so it can be easier to see. But if you remember how we start at the beginning of when we turn that chain, we have our loop up here. There's this loop. We're going to find the next hole, go through, pull our string through, then we have our two friends. So we're going to stitch them together and find the next hole, which is right here. Pull through, stitch those two friends together, just like that. Find our next hole, pull back through, and stitch these two friends together. Find our next hole, pull back through, stitch those friends together. And before you know it, there you are. You're getting into a rhythm, and you, my friends, are crocheting. Got my two friends, looping over, stitching them together. So it's coming together nicely. But I want to see some more of these colors, and I want you to have something to watch so that you can learn. And as you go, you'll find that you might get faster and you might get more comfortable with the way we're moving through. But if you need some help and you need to remember, you can think to yourself, all right, find the next hole. There it is. Whoa, I need some more yarn. All right, find the next hole, pull that yarn back through it, find your two friends, and stitch them together. Next hole, pull back through, and stitch those friends together. Next hole, pull back through, and stitch the friends together. Next hole, pull back through. It gets kind of tight over here at the edge. And stitch our friends together. Now, we are at the end. There's 3 lovely rows. And you can see it's not perfectly straight. It's a little warpy. That's what yarn does when you twist it a lot. So now I'm just going to turn So I'm turning to where my yarn is facing the other way. And I'm going to find a hole, go through it, bring that yarn back through, and stitch those friends together. Find my next hole, bring the yarn back through, stitch those friends together, and so on and so forth. So you find the next hole, and hopefully that's still clear. So you can see like hole right there, here, here, and as we go down. So I'm going to find my next hole, I'm going in, pulling that yarn back through, then I have my two friends, and I'm going to stitch them together. So hole, pull back, two friends, and stitch them together. Going into a hole, bringing that yarn back, having my two friends, and stitching them together. So in the hole, pull back through, two friends, and stitch them together. I'm going to complete this row just at my own speed so you can watch how it becomes rhythmic. It's hard to talk and crochet at the same time, but you're going to keep pulling, keep finding the hole, and stitching those two friends together. Hole, pull back through, and stitch those friends together. Pull back through, stitch those friends together. And I know that I've got one more stitch because it seems like something's missing here. So I'm going to find my top two threads, pull back through there, stitch the friends together, and then I can turn. Again, when I turn, I look like this, and I'm going right back through that same hole that I just made and stitching those friends together, and then through the next hole and the next hole. And this is getting really curly, but it'll flatten out by the time I get to the end. So you can see the rhythm that I've developed. I like to wrap with this finger and then pull. So I come through, I like to wrap with that finger and come through. And if you ever get to a point where you're thinking to yourself, I don't know where I am, I don't know what I did, you can bring your needle out and you can pull out the last few stitches. So you can just simply pull like this to where you find a place that you know that's the top of the little stitch there. You get your hook back in and you say, okay, where's that next hole? And you find it and you pull back through and continue. Sometimes I have to unravel a little bit if I've gotten off track, or if I just don't like the way the tension of the yarn has been. But other than that, you can just keep going. So I'm getting to, I think this might be the last on my chain here. Let's see. Yes, that looks like the last one. So I'm going to pull through, flip around, and get started going back the other direction. What I want you to look at here, when I got started, it was a little loose. So you can see it's a little wrinklier down here. And as I'm going, my stitches are getting a lot nicer because I'm kind of getting into the groove. You know, this is a little messy down here, but that's okay. At the end of every project, you can stitch around all of your edges, and that's really going to bring it together a lot more easily. All right, so let's go back. I'm going to turn, show you again how to turn. I'm going to get comfortable with where the yarn is in my hands and go under the last hole that I made, pull that yarn through and then pull through both of those. Now all I gotta do is look for the next hole for a little while. Whoa! There's the hole. And I'm gonna keep just stitching those two friends together. So I'm going in, pulling back through, and stitching my friends together. So you know I said you could hold it like a knife. Some people like to hold it like this and go through and pull back through and stitch together. And then like this and pull back through and stitch together. But I prefer to hold it from underneath. It's just the way that I learned and the way that my habit has become. If it's easier for you to hold it like a knife and control everything you're doing, then do that. It's a lot of things. Like any art, you get comfortable with the way you want to do things, and that's all right. This just completely unravels all of the tension in my brain when I do it. I really enjoy it. Ooh, I'm about to get to my favorite color in this yarn, the blue part. All right, and sometimes you get to the end and it's confusing. That's all right, it's kind of normal. Just kind of find your next hole. Sometimes finding the next hole isn't the easy part, but I'm gonna find two pieces of this red to go under and bring my yarn back through, and then there we go. And I'm gonna turn. Whoa. Let's pull it, and I'm gonna go into that first hole. So in I go, bring the yarn back through, and stitch my friends together. Then I'm finding the next hole, coming back through and stitching those together. And it's finally starting to feel like something now that I have several rows going. I'm developing a little bit of a rhythm. I've got a lot of colors coming through in this yarn, which is always fun. I like the multicolored yarns. If you lose it, if you lose that rhythm, just talk to yourself a little bit. You want to find the next hole. You're going through, hooking that yarn, bringing it back through to where you have your two friends, and then you're going to hook some yarn and stitch those two friends together. Through the hole, back through the hole, two friends, stitch them together. So this yarn, kind of gotten out into the weave of the yarn, so I'm going to pull that out and I'm going to put it back in and pull, and then I'm back into the regular part of the yarn. All right, in my hole, bringing that back through and stitching the friends together. Finding a hole here somewhere, bringing it back through, stitching together. So let's turn one more time. So I'm just flipping it around. And then we're going to go right back in here, bring it through, and stitch those friends together. So next hole, next hole, next hole, next one, next one, next hole, next hole, bring it back through, and stitch those friends together. All right, next hole, bring it back through, stitch those friends together. And then I'm at that evil place at the end where it's hard to find my stitches, but I'm finding my way. I'm figuring it out. And if I pull up the wrong 2 pieces of thread, I'm not going to worry right now. I'm going to turn and I'm going to go back into this hole that I just made, bring that yarn through, and move right along. All right, I'm getting good. I'm getting all of my colors. I love this. I'm back to green again. This is so beautiful. Okay, so find my next hole, come on up, and bring those friends together. And sometimes your yarn will slip off of your hook. That's okay, just put it right back on there. The number one thing that I want you to get from this video is a basic understanding of how the crochet stitch works. And if you do this and you think to yourself, I don't like this at all, I really, really don't like this, all you have to do is unravel. You can pull it completely undone. Start over. Just start the video over. Some people learn better by looking at a book. Some people learn better by watching it get done. I'm one of those people that learns better watching a video of someone else. But if you like to look at exactly the instructions and diagrams, the best thing I think to do is either grab yourself a book from the library about crochet, or if you don't have access to a library or you just don't want to go, look on Pinterest. I bet there's a lot of how-to on Pinterest. Crochet is a very old art, so I'm certain that you'll be able to find something on there. Wow, I really did these tight. Where are you? Next hole. There we go. So I'm just coming back through and we're making those friends. All right, I'm turning and I'll do one more row with you, my friends. And I want you to make sure that you see, how this is really sort of ruffly. It's looking weird, but if we stretch out, things will start to be a little bit more symmetrical. So no sweat, we're getting it done. I'm gonna do this one last row with you. So here we go. Back through the hole I just made. Pull that yarn through and come on up. Pull through, stitch the friends together. Find a hole, pull through it, stitch those friends together. Oh, and my hook slipped, but I just want to get that piece of yarn back so that I don't get off track. I'm all the way back to yellow again. I'm starting to really see what this yarn looks like when it's stitched together. And I'm gonna stop when I get to the end of this row, which is pretty much right now. Where is my next hole? I think it's right here. All right, so the way I like to stop is to pull a giant loop. That way, if anything happens to my yarn ball and it starts pulling, at least it's not gonna unravel all this work that I did, right? So that's the basics, y'all, of how to crochet. And you can do any number of things with something like this. If you wanna make your chain at first super duper duper long, you could make a scarf where the rows go up and down. Or we could use this to make a scarf. We could just keep going and going and going until we get to the length of a scarf that we want, and we could have this beautiful rainbow scarf. So that is the very, very beginning of crochet. I hope that you learned something. If you feel frustrated, I just want you to think about the fact that you're brand new to this and that you can always try again. And the good thing is it's not like paper where you've painted and you can't get rid of it. With crochet, you can completely undo. If I wasn't happy with this, I could just completely undo the whole entire thing. And I know you're thinking, no, stop. It's okay. I don't mind. I am going to have a good time working on this, no matter what. And that's how easy it is to simply start over. Let's just pull it all out. It starts to be fun at some point. So I can pull the whole thing and I can completely start over if I want to. Maybe I was making this thinking, I do want to make a purse, so I'm going to make it a little bit wider. So I'm going to start all over and see if I can make my stitches nicer. Maybe I'll make my chain longer. When you get to the chain, sometimes as yarn gets caught up on itself, you can see what that's happening right there. So you got to pull a little bit harder to get it undone. There we go. And sometimes you can even pull out your knot, but this one doesn't want to pull out. So I'll just start over again. Enjoy, and thanks for giving yourself this time to learn something new. That's great for your brain at any age and any stage of life. I'm so proud of you.